Hello, class. I'm expecting more people to join us. All right, there's 6 of you online at the moment. I tell you what, I'm going to go heat up my coffee and give folks 2 more minutes to join in. I'll be right back. We will start in 2 minutes. Okay, good morning. I'm losing viewers, which is sad, but that's okay. Let me ask you one question real quick. I'm going to ask you one question and then we will start the class. The one question is, are you guys able to watch the videos after they're recorded? Are you able to go back later after the fact and find the videos? Yes or no? Good. Excellent. Okay, then why don't we just start the class? May the force be with you and also with you. Good to see everyone. Let's see here. I've got 2 quick housekeeping notes. 2 quick housekeeping notes. And the first one is, today is lecture 3 of 4 on Aristotle. You'll notice that on the YouTube videos and also on my Google Drive lecture notes, I put like 3 out of 4 or 1 over 4, 2 over 4. Today is lecture 3 over 4. That means that this is the 3rd out of 4 lectures on Aristotle. So we've just got 1 more. According to the reading schedule, remember the reading schedule is very important. We try to stick to the reading schedule. According to the reading schedule, we will have 1 more lecture after today on Aristotle, and then we will move to Descartes. Okay, so that's one housekeeping item for you today. The second one is that you will have a quiz. You will have a quiz. What I want to do is to make that quiz go live on Canvas on Thursday morning at 8, and kind of like we did last time, I'll give you. You know what I'm going to do this. It's different this time because we're not meeting physically. I'll make it go live at 8. I'll take the first 10 minutes of class and let you guys take it. If people aren't in class, I will leave it open for, probably 4 or 5 hours and try to force people to take the quiz on, I'll probably leave it open for like 12 hours and let people take the quiz at any time on Thursday. But there will be a quiz on Thursday. And one of the questions will be from the text. I told you last time that I would take a question from the paragraph on page 3 that we read. We are going to look at another paragraph today in the Barnes book, and there may be a question from that paragraph as well. Yeah, and then the third, I have one more housekeeping item to talk about, and that is that I've received two or three uh, messages from students about the paper. There have been two or three students who have given me something to look at, an outline or maybe a rough draft, and I will get to those today. If anyone else wants to send me something, then I'm sure that I could get to that in the next week. Your paper is due when? Who can remind me of when your paper is due? I am looking at the syllabus. The 28th, second. Good. Okay, good. So you've got a couple of weeks. If anyone wants to send me something, I'm sure that I can look at that in the next week. Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna just start lecturing on Aristotle. This is our third out of fourth lecture. Have you guys been able to look at my Google Notes, my notes on Google Drive? Is that working out for you? By the way, this is the first semester I've ever sort of made those public like this. But are y'all able to look at those notes on Google Drive? On Google Drive? If anyone has a problem with that, let me know. I mean, I think technically you don't have to have a Gmail address to view Google Documents, so it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to go on our lecture notes. I'm on Tuesday, October 13. This is lecture 3 out of 4 on Aristotle. And I wanted to start out as I normally do with some review. And so y'all look with me at A under 0, review from last time. I want to ask you to fill in the blanks here. For Plato, form is blank, but for Aristotle, form is blank. Anyone remember what the answer to those questions is? For Plato, form, remember, what the context here is that for Aristotle, all things or objects in the world are composite unities of form and matter. We're going to get to that in a moment. But for now, remember, Plato talks a lot about form. He doesn't talk so much about matter. He does talk about it, especially in his dialogue, the Timaeus, but we didn't really talk about that in this class. But for Plato, form is what? Does anyone remember that from last time? For Plato, form is transcendent. That's right. That's right, Emily. For Plato, form is transcendent. And for Aristotle, form is immanent. Now, that word immanent is kind of difficult to spell. There's actually 3 different ways to spell the word immanent. But this is the correct spelling. That is the correct spelling. Emily, the way that you spelled the word immanent means something else. That spelling indicates that something is going to happen soon. So you might say that the election is imminent. The presidential election is imminent, which means that it's going to happen very quickly, very soon. I'm about to sneeze. I don't know how to turn off my camera. Excuse me. Oh, the joys of online lecturing. Good. So for Plato, form is transcendent, and for Aristotle, form is immanent, which is why in that painting that we looked at last time, right, which was Raphael's School of Athens. In that painting that we looked at last time, Raphael's School of Athens, which is in the Vatican in Rome, Plato is pointing up, Aristotle is pointing down, right? Or going like this. Because for Plato, form is transcendent, which means that it's out there. It's beyond the world. It's meta in that sense. Remember that the word metaphysics means beyond the world, or means beyond the physics. So for Plato, form is beyond. For Aristotle, in general, form is immanent. All objects in the world are composite unities of form and matter. And in that case, the form is in the thing for Aristotle, okay? Good. Moving on in the review, letter B, the things or objects in the world are composite unities of form and matter. That's what we just talked about. Composite unities of form and matter. For Aristotle, form and matter come together to make turtles or cockroaches or frogs or cups or highlighters or coins. Every single object that you can identify in the world, for Aristotle, is a composite unity of form and matter. We're going to talk a little bit about Heraclitus later in the class. What does Heraclitus say about this coin? This is a coin from some other country. I don't remember what country. It might be Guatemala. Heraclitus says that this coin actually doesn't exist. You might think it exists. You might think that you can see it. You might think that you can identify it. But actually, if you were to take a time lapse of this coin and speed it up radically, you would see that this coin will not be around in 1,000 years or in 1,000,000 years. And so the coin actually has no stable identity, just like my body has no stable identity, just like the tree outside of that window has no stable identity. I mean, that tree is always changing. The tree will not be there in 100 years. The tree is already in the process of growing and decaying, which is Plato's realm of becoming. Aristotle calls it physis or nature. Yeah, so that's true for the tree, but Heraclitus would also say that it's true for the coin. Aristotle rejects that view. Okay, we're gonna come back to Heraclitus / Cratylus in a few moments, but Aristotle rejects that view. Aristotle would say, no, the coin is real. It is actually real. We can identify it. We can talk about it. And in particular, it is a composite unity of form and matter. It's made out of a particular kind of stuff, and it has a particular conceptual definition. We could take our philosophically airtight dictionary and look up the word coin and find an exhaustive definition of coin. That definition would talk about metal, possibly iron. It would talk about shape. It would talk about all sorts of things, and it would exhaustively define coin. And that, my friends, basically is what he means by form. So the coin, just like every other object in the world for Aristotle, it has a material constitution, but it also has this kind of conceptual being to it. And that being, that conceptual being, is in the coin somehow. That's what Aristotle wants to say. Plato says, oh, no, that conceptual being is not in the coin. It's out there somewhere. And what a Christian would say, a Christian reading of Plato, as well as certain Jews and Muslims, would be something like this. The form of the coin is in the mind of God. Okay, but it's not in the thing. It's in the mind of God. Okay, so that was B. The things or objects in the world are composite unities of form and matter. That would be a really obvious quiz question. And that's probably one of the more important things that I'm trying to get you to think about this semester. For Aristotle, the things in the world are composite unities of form and matter. Now, I've talked a little bit about how Heraclitus would reject that view, because Heraclitus says, oh no, there are no things in the world. There's only a blooming, buzzing confusion. There's only a swirling vortex of change. What Heraclitus and Cratylus want to say is that all is flux. If all is flux, there are no stable objects in the world, right? And what I've tried to say to you guys is that we can see this in the Bible. This is a form of nihilism, I would say. Nihilism comes from the German word nihil, which means nothing. Heraclitus wants to say nothing exists. And what's crazy is that in Genesis 1:2, we see that view. Genesis 1:2, and the earth was formless and void, and darkness covered the surface of the deep. In the moment of Genesis 1:2 in the biblical imagination, nothing existed. At that moment, nothing existed in the world. Later, God comes and he brings form out of chaos. He creates light. He separates light from darkness. He separates dry land from the seas, and he moves in and structures creation. He structures the world. But prior to that moment, Heraclitus's view was the biblical view. Okay. And so Heraclitus would say, oh no, the coin does not exist. Who else would say that the coin does not exist? Can someone give me another pre-Socratic thinker that we looked at? And this is the guy who is the opposite of Heraclitus. Who's the other guy, the other pre-Socratic thinker who would say that the coin and the tree outside my window, they don't actually exist? Heraclitus is not the only one who says that. There's someone else who says that. It's the equal and opposite view of Heraclitus. Checking to see if anyone's watching the video. Yay, Saken. Parmenides. Parmenides would also say that the coin does not exist, but for reasons radically different than those of Heraclitus. What Parmenides wants to say is that the reason the coin doesn't exist is because if you say that the coin exists, you're implying non-being. Why? Why? It's because the coin is not the highlighter. Did you hear that? Not? That implies that somehow there's non-being going on. And what does Parmenides want to say? Whack a non-being. Don't think about non-being. Non-being isn't real. It can't be real. Don't talk about it. Don't think about it. Parmenides wants to say, if anything is real, it must be one. There can be no diversity, no multiplicity, no parts and wholes, no change. Being is one. And so Parmenides and Heraclitus both agree that the coin does not exist. Parmenides and Heraclitus would both agree that we think we see the coin, but in reality, that's some kind of illusion or some kind of mistake that we are making, okay? When we get to Nietzsche later in the class, we're going to see that Nietzsche is a nihilist of the Heraclitan variety. And yeah, it's not a crazy view, okay? That's a little bit of review, but all that to say, for Aristotle, the things in the world, the objects of the world are composite unities of form and matter, okay? Moving on to number C. Now, y'all, I keep saying that the things of the world or the objects of the world are composite unities, but now I want to give you sort of a technical term, that Barnes talks about in the Aristotle book, and he talks about it primarily in chapter 10, or he at least he begins to introduce the topic in chapter 10, and I am referring to the term substance. Substance. You see, it's not just the things in the world that are composite unities of form and matter. It's not just objects. We're going to talk about that notion of object when we get to Descartes in a couple of weeks. But the real thing for Aristotle, which is composite unity of form and matter, it's not just an object, it's a substance. It's a substance. Aristotle thinks that which exists most truly, you might think of it as the basic building block of reality, the basic building block of reality is, for Aristotle, substance. Okay? And look with me at D. The primary instances of substances for Aristotle are living organisms. Living organisms. What is it that's special about a living organism? And by the way, y'all, this is chapter 10 of the Barnes book, chapter 10, entitled Reality. Barnes rightly says that for Aristotle, there's something special about living organisms. What is it about living organisms like ladybugs, sunflower seeds, human beings, frogs, amoebas, tadpoles? What is it about these things that is special? Well, what's special about them is that in some sense, they are independent. In some sense, a frog is its own thing. A frog has its own life. A frog, it's true that the frog is dependent on other things. For example, the frog is dependent on air, on food, on its parents. Yeah, all that's true. But also, in some sense, a frog can do its own thing. A frog can feed itself, nourish itself. A frog can grow. A frog has inherently within it a power to grow. A frog can reproduce itself through sexual activity. Yeah, a frog is an independent thing. See, a frog is different from orange. If you think about orange, this highlighter is orange. There's no such thing as orange here without the highlighter. If the highlighter goes away, orange goes away, right? So orange, which in philosophy is called an attribute or a property or a characteristic, the orange is dependent upon the highlighter, but a frog is not dependent on anything in that way. By the way, the highlighter is also not dependent on anything in that way, right? You can say that if the orange goes, that if the highlighter goes away, the orange goes away, but the reverse is not true, right? It's not necessarily the case that if the orange goes away, the highlighter goes away. You can have a yellow highlighter. In fact, I have one right there. You can have a green highlighter. So orange is dependent on the highlighter in a way that the highlighter is not dependent on the orange. And so, yeah, it's true that the highlighter is also a substance. That's true, as opposed to the orange. The highlighter is a substance, but it's living organisms that are kind of like the best example or the primary instance of substance. Why? It's because they're so independent. They have their own existence. They can do their own thing. The highlighter is radically dependent on human activity. I mean, it's not alive. It doesn't have life. And so it had to be made by human beings. But the oak tree was not made by a human being. The frog was not made by a human being. It has its own independence in that way. So, y'all, what I'm trying to say is that for Aristotle, the primary instance of substances is living beings. And maybe that is why he wrote an entire book called On the Soul. I wish I had my copy of it, but no, it's in my office, and I'm at home right now. Aristotle wrote a specific book dedicated to living organisms, aka the primary instance of substances. And it's called On the Soul. In other words, friends, I'm on D. The primary instances of substances are living organisms. But question, what is the form of a living organism called? What is the form of a living organism called? And this is review from a couple of days ago. This would be a great quiz question also. For Aristotle, what is the form of a living organism called? There's a specific term that Aristotle uses for the form of a living organism, not the form of a coin, not the form of a highlighter, but the form of a living creature, whether it's an oak tree or a frog or a human being. Y'all, it is the word soul, which in Greek is psyche, which is closely related to psyche, like psychology. And Aristotle devotes a whole book to talking about soul. What is soul? Soul is the form of a living organism, okay? And you remember, just by way of quick review, that, in fact, let me ask you, who can tell me how many levels, I told you, how many levels of soul are there for the human being? How many levels of the soul are there for Aristotle? 5? 2? Who can remind me? That's right, Emily, there's 3. Emily, do y'all remember the bottom level of the soul for Aristotle, the most basic level? What was it called? Do you remember what that bottom level was called? Yeah, that's right, Kyrie, vegetative or nutritive, right? And that's the kind of soul that only plants have, right? What is the middle level of the soul called for Aristotle? Nope, Sanchella, not logic. It's the nutritive or vegetative level of the soul. Who can tell me what the middle section of the soul is, the one that non-rational animals have? This is a little bit of review. This could easily be on a quiz. Okay, good, Rebecca. So the answer is appetitive. Good. Appetitive or sensate, Emily. That's right. That's good. I would not count that wrong, Emily. Sensitive. Appetitive or sensate. That's what lions have, lions and giraffes. A lion smells a gazelle off in the distance, 30 yards away. He sees it and then he goes after it and he eats it, right? He has an appetite for the gazelle and he senses it, right? That's exactly right. And then for the rational animal, aka the human being, remember for Aristotle, human beings are animals. We are rational animals. We are animals with logos, animals with reason, animals with language, okay? And for Aristotle, the highest level of the soul is the rational soul. And that's what human beings have, right? So you've got vegetative at the bottom, appetitive in the middle, and then rational at the top. Human beings have all the levels. Animals, non-rational animals, only have the bottom 2, sensate and nutritive. But y'all, the point right now is, why does Aristotle spend so much time talking about the soul? The reason is because the primary substance for Aristotle is the living organism. And the living organism, the form of the living organism is called soul or psyche. You might think of psyche as the principle of life in the living organism, okay? I'm going to keep going. I think that completes our review. And I hope that if anyone has any questions, you'll just go ahead and put them in the chat, okay? Y'all, I want to read another paragraph from the Barnes book. This is the paragraph at the bottom of page 71. Bottom of page 71. And it's not a complete paragraph. It's the paragraph at the bottom of page 71, which is an incomplete paragraph. I want to read this, okay? We can now return to Aristotle's eternal question, what things in fact are substances, right? So for Parmenides, there's one substance, it's called being. We'll come back to that in a minute. For Heraclitus, there's no such thing as substance because there's no such thing as anything. There's only change, and not even Heraclitus would say that change is a substance. But for Aristotle, the question is, what are substances? We should not expect a simple and authoritative answer for Aristotle. After all, he says that the question is perpetually puzzling. And in fact, his attempted answers are hesitant and difficult to understand. But one or two things emerge fairly clearly. And y'all, here's where I want you to really pay attention to this paragraph at the bottom of page 71, okay? Aristotle's predecessors. I want you to underline that word predecessors. Aristotle's predecessors had, he thought, implicitly offered a number of different answers to the question. The question, what is a substance? In other words, what is the basic building block of reality? Aristotle's predecessors had, he thought, implicitly offered a number of different answers to the question. Some had held that stuffs, gold, flesh, earth, water, were substances. He's thinking primarily of the earliest Greek philosophers who focused their attention on the material constitutions, on the material constituents of things. Now, y'all, I think that we talked about Thales a little bit at the very, very beginning of the class. Remember, there's lots and lots of pre-Socratic philosophers. The two that we focused on most are Heraclitus and Parmenides, but there's other pre-Socratic philosophers too. And I think that I mentioned Thales at the very beginning of the class. I hope that I did. Thales said that all is water, which is crazy, right? For Thales, the basic building block of all reality is water. There's another dude named, you know what, we'll come back to that. Let me keep reading. Aristotle's predecessors, blah, 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 some had held that stuff, gold, flesh, earth, and water were substances. He's thinking primarily of the earliest Greek philosophers, aka the pre-Socratics, who focused their attention on the material constituents of things. Others had held that the ultimate parts of ordinary things were substances. Aristotle is thinking of the ancient atomists, whose basic entities were microscopical corpuscles. So y'all, we've now talked about two of Aristotle's predecessors. What I'm going to call the naturalists, that first group who say that the basic building block of reality is stuffs, gold, flesh, earth, water. I'm going to call those naturalists. That's like Thales saying that all is water. You've got the naturalists, and then you've got the atomists. These are two different predecessors of Aristotle, okay? I'm going to keep reading. Yet other thinkers had proposed that numbers were substances, that numbers are the primary building block of reality. We've talked about number in this class quite a bit. The Pythagoreans and certain of Plato's followers fall into this camp. Finally, some had decided that substances are only to be found among certain abstract entities or universals. Plato's doctrine of forms is the outstanding example of such a theory. Chalk, a gaggle of quarks, the prime numbers, truth and beauty, all are or were held to be prime candidates for substancehood. Okay, y'all, look with me on my notes, on my lecture notes. Look with me at Roman numeral 1, okay? Because this paragraph is about Aristotle's predecessors. And this is a theme that I come back to over and over in this class. One of the things that I'm trying to do in this class is to show you that the best thinkers take two different views, maybe more, but two different views, and put them in dialectic, right? But where do these two different views that they take and pick up and put in dialectic, where do those views come from? Well, they come from one's predecessors, okay? In other words, Aristotle is looking back in history at people who have come before him, thinkers who've come before him, and he's saying, wow, that person is half right or largely right. I'm going to pick up his view and I'm going to put it together with someone else's view, okay? So there's 4 different predecessors that Barnes talks about in this paragraph. First off, you've got the very first pre-Socratics, which I'm going to call the naturalists. You can also call them physicalists. You can also call them the Milesians. The Milesians, or naturalists, or physicalists, said that all is blank. Fill in the blank. Fill in the blank with a natural element. Earth, water. I'm going to say water, air. Where did my comment? Okay. The Milesians, or naturalists or physicalists, said that all is blank. Fill in the blank with some element like earth, wind, fire, water, right? Thales said that all is water. That's kind of crazy. So this coin is actually water. The tree outside the window is actually water. That's what Thales thought. Another guy named Anaximenes thought that everything is air. So the coin is really air. That's the that's the naturalists or the Milesians, the very first pre-Socratics. Then you've got the atomists who say, oh, no, it's not the case that primary substance, the basic building block of reality, is air or water. It's actually the atom. The atom is the primary building block of reality, the primary substance. By the way, folks, the word atom means uncuttable. Uncuttable. The Greek verb tome means to cut. But if something, but the A is a privative, it means not. It's a negation. So an atom is something that's not cuttable. For the ancient atomists, an atom cannot be cut. But for modern people, can an atom be cut? Yes, we can slice and dice an atom and we can talk about its various parts. Electron, proton, quark, nucleus, all of these things are parts of atoms. You see, modern people are not real atomists. To be a true atomist, you have to say that the atom cannot be separated. It has no parts. For a true atomist, and the atom is kind of like Parmenidean being. It's complete and whole. You cannot divide it or separate it or find distinctions within it, okay? So modern people are not real atomists. I mean, if most people today say that they believe in atoms, and that's fine, but they're not real atoms, because a real atom for an ancient thinker is something that cannot be cut or in any way separated or even distinguished. You can't identify different parts of an atom for ancient atomists, but for modern people, we think that we can do that. Electron, proton, nucleus, etc. Okay? So the atomists are a second wave of predecessor. It's as if Aristotle's looking back in history and he's saying, first, there were the Milesians, the naturalists who said that all is some element, water, air, fire. Then you have the atomists who came along after them and said, oh, no, the basic building block of reality is atoms. Then you have the Pythagoreans, which say that, oh, no, the basic building block of matter, of all reality, is number. And then you have the Platonists. What's the point? The point is that the way Aristotle thinks is he looks back at his predecessors and he takes what's right about their view and tries to integrate it into a new view, okay? And we see that in Aristotle over and over and over again. What I'm trying to say to you is that if you want to understand philosophy, and if you really want to understand reality and how to think, you have to understand the value of history. There's no thought without history. If it weren't for the atomists and the Milesians, Aristotle wouldn't have had any material to think with. He got his material to think with from his predecessors, which is a way of saying that history is super important and absolutely necessary to knowing how to think. Okay, that's Roman numeral 1, and that's that paragraph at the bottom of page 71. It's theoretically possible that I could put a question from that paragraph on your quiz. Okay, and I'm gonna make your quiz today. Hang on, real quick. I need to write that down. I'm gonna make your quiz today. And I'm also going to look at your essays and outlines today. Okay. Y'all, we have about 20 minutes left in the class today. And so what I want to do, and this is where it kind of stinks that we're not meeting in person and I don't have a chalkboard, and also I haven't been super technologically sophisticated so far in this class. Because what I want to do is go back to that picture of the metaphysical spectrum, okay? The metaphysical spectrum, Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum, it should be on canvas. Yep, 2 Aristotle pics. One of the pictures is of the metaphysical spectrum. I'm trying to pull it up right now. Yes, I have it pulled up. If you guys could pull up the pic of Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum, let me know if you have that. Okay. And if you're watching this on an iPhone or whatever, a small device, you can get the picture later. I wish I could show it to you, but I'm not using Zoom, sadly, so I don't know how on YouTube. But y'all, we're going to add a couple of things to Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum, okay? There's 2 basic extremes to Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum. There's 2 basic extremes. And on the left side, or on one extreme, you have what? What is on the left side or one extreme of Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum? Who can tell me? Y'all, philosophy is very different from any other class at UT Tyler that you would ever take. It's thinking about reality and what's true, and it's just so different from chemistry or political science or history or molecular biology. It's very different. Jocelyn, thank you very much. Okay, that you've got pure form. In my mind, that's sort of on the right hand of the spectrum, but it doesn't matter. Let's start out with, you know what, Jocelyn, I actually want to start with the other extreme on the spectrum. Who can tell me what the opposite of pure form is? What's the other end of the spectrum, the opposite of pure form? Prime matter, Sanchella. That's exactly right, prime matter. Let's start on that end. On one end of the spectrum, you have prime matter, and And who can tell me who is the pre-Socratic thinker that we associate with prime matter? Who is the pre-Socratic thinker that we associate with prime matter? By the way, if that's not easy for you to answer, think about this. Who is the pre-Socratic thinker that we associate with pure form? The pre-Socratic thinker that we associate with pure form would be Parmenides. But the pre-Socratic thinker that we associate with prime matter is Heraclitus. Why? How can that be the case? Y'all, because what Aristotle says about prime matter is that it's a big mess. You cannot say anything about it. The only thing you can say about prime matter is that it is spatially extended. Aristotle says that the only thing you can say about prime matter is that it is spatially extended. The only thing you can say about prime matter is that it's spatially extended, okay? In other words, prime matter is a big mess. It's like the television static that I showed you at the beginning of the semester before cable TV existed. You would turn on the TV and you would see all these black and white flickers. I call that static. If you look at that TV screen with the static, you can't see a tree. You can't see a triangle because there is no triangle. All there is a blooming, buzzing confusion. And that's like prime matter. What Aristotle says about prime matter is that the only thing you can say about it is that it's spatially extended. You can't say that it's beautiful. You can't say that it's pink. You can't say that it's geometric. You can't say that it's, you can't talk about up and down. You can't, the only thing you can say about it is that it's spatially extended. You can't say that it looks like an oak tree. You can't say that it looks flat. The only thing you can say about it is that it's spatially extended. You cannot say, oh, there's a triangle. Oh, look, I see a face in the bottom right. You can't say anything like that. It's a blooming, buzzing confusion. It's a big mess. The only thing you can say about it is that it's spatially extended. Now Heraclitus would come along and say, oh, and here's another thing you can say about it. It's constantly changing. It's flux. It's like a vortex of swirling forces, and it's just a big changing mess all the time. All right. You know what? One way to think about it would be kind of like cancer cells, cancer cells that just mutate. There's no structure to cancer cells that just mutate. There's no shape, there's no order, there's no beauty. It's just chaotic. That's prime matter, okay? And it's not bad, but it is formless and void. And so the thinker that we associate with prime matter on that end of the spectrum is Heraclitus. Heraclitus, who says that all is flux and you can't talk about any kind of form or order or design or beauty in the world because everything is changing all the time, okay? Yeah, that's prime matter. And we associate that with Heraclitus. Y'all, but here's, I want to add a couple of things to the spectrum today. We're going to add a couple of things to the spectrum today. But before we do that, let's go to the other extreme of the spectrum where you have pure form. Pure form is the total opposite of prime matter. And y'all, if Heraclitus is the pre-Socratic thinker that we associate with prime matter, who is the pre-Socratic thinker that we associate with pure form? Who could answer that question for me? What thinker do we associate with pure form? Not Heraclitus. Parmenides. That's right, Megan. Good job. I'm getting a bazillion texts today. Why Parmenides? Parmenides says that being must be one. It doesn't contain it. There is no parts and wholes. It's certainly not physical. Let's put it like that. That might be a good way for you to think about it. I don't tend to like the word physical, and I'm not going to tell you why that is. It has to do with the Greek word physios, which doesn't mean physical, it means nature. But anyway, let's just say physical. What Parmenides is saying is that being must not be physical, right? But if you think about prime matter, that it's kind of like brute physicality. That's all it is physical. Okay? So yeah, Parmenides is on the other end of the spectrum, and we associate him with pure form. And for Aristotle, the ultimate example of pure form is God, which in Greek is theos, Theos. And God has various names for Aristotle. Who can tell me, does anyone remember any of Aristotle's names for God? Who can remind me of Aristotle's names for God? There's at least two. Megan, you're good. Parmenides is a very difficult word to spell. I'm going to spell it for you. I sometimes I can't even spell it. It helps if you know Greek. Parmenides. I think that's it. Good, Sanchella and Jocelyn. Okay, now listen, Jocelyn, not unmoving mover. It's unmoved mover. And then good, Jocelyn, unmoved mover. Or you could say prime mover, that's good. And thought thinking itself. That's right, Jocelyn, that's right, Sanchella, excellent. Those are two of Aristotle's names for God. But then I also just say theos, which Jocelyn, I know you tried to write that. Theos, which is just the Greek word for God. Good. And so, yeah, God is pure form. So if you grew up, if you went to Sunday school class like I did in a Baptist church or even a Catholic church, you probably learned that God does not have a body, right? By the way, there have been other people in the history of the world who thought that God does have a body, but no, Christians, Orthodox Christians and Muslims and Jews all agree that God does not have a body. Well, that's like Parmenides, right? That's like Parmenides. That's like Aristotle's pure form. Yeah. Now, y'all, we only have like 5 or 10 minutes left in the class today. And so I think what I want to do, I can tell I'm not going to totally get to, I'm not going to be able to finish what I wanted to do today. That's okay. We'll pick it up next time. But what I want to do, I want you to draw a picture, and it can be, you can draw the picture in your mind. If I had a chalkboard behind me, I could draw it on the chalkboard. But in your mind, I want you to draw a picture. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to, on the end of the spectrum where it says prime matter, I want you to write two things. I want you to write, I'm going to put it like this. On the left extreme of the spectrum, add potential and a picture of an acorn. Okay? So there's two things on the left-hand side of the spectrum with prime matter that I want you to add. We're adding a couple of things to the spectrum today, Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum. We're adding the word potential, and I want you to draw a picture of an acorn, okay? In fact, draw a picture of the acorn at the very top, okay? And on the right extreme of the spectrum, add the word or the phrase, add the phrase full actuality, and draw a picture of an oak tree. Okay, so on the left-hand side of the spectrum with Heraclitus and prime matter, you're adding the word potential or potentiality, and a picture of an acorn. On the other extreme of the spectrum, along with pure form, you're adding the phrase full actuality and a picture of an oak tree, okay? So y'all, what's the point here? The point here is that in Aristotle's way of thinking about things, prime matter, and remember, for Aristotle, every single thing in the world, every single substance is a composite unity of these two things, right? Form and matter, matter and form. So you can see that Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum, I'm going to write this, Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum I'm going to say is a macrocosm of every item in the world. I hope you can see that. Can you all see that? So reality itself, Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum, has two principles, matter and form. Well, that's kind of like the cup, right? That's kind of like the cup. The cup is also composed by form and matter. The cup is a composite unity of form and matter, just like frogs are, just like rational animals like Matt or Aristotle or Donald Trump is, right? So you can see how there's a similarity between every single item in the world, a cup, a frog, Donald Trump on the one hand, and Aristotle's metaphysical spectrum on the other hand. They're both composed of these two things, form and matter, matter and form, okay? So what I'm trying to say to you today is that we're adding a couple of things to this picture. We're going to add the word potential or potentiality over there along with prime matter, and also the picture of an acorn. And on the other end of the spectrum, we're going to add the word full actuality and the picture of an oak tree. And y'all, I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to close this class, and we will pick up with this next time, okay? What Aristotle thinks is that there's a kind of movement or process. I'm going to write this, a kind of movement, process, development, progression from matter to form. Aristotle thinks that this metaphysical spectrum, it's not just a schema, a static schema, but there's also a kind of development, a kind of growth, a kind of motion. Things start out as potential, like an acorn. What is an acorn? What is an acorn? An acorn is a potential oak tree, right? So you can see that the acorn is the oak tree, but in potential form. What is the oak tree? The oak tree is the full actuality of the acorn. This is how Aristotle thinks. So I will close like this. It is the purpose of the acorn to develop into the oak tree. The oak tree is the full actuality of the acorn. The oak tree is fully active, fully active. By the way, when I said full actuality, I should have said full activity. That's probably better for you guys. Full activity. The oak tree is fully active. The oak tree is doing what the acorn is supposed to do, big branches, shade that people can come and have picnics underneath, deep roots that go down into the ground, big, huge branches that birds can come and and build their nests in. See, the oak tree is fully active. And y'all, I want to close like this. In Aristotle's imagination, the way that he envisions all of this is that the oak tree is like God. See, the acorn is like prime matter. The acorn is like Genesis 1-2 in a sense, but the oak tree is like God. When the oak tree is fully active as an oak tree, doing the things that oak trees are supposed to do, fulfilling the purpose of an acorn, whenever the oak tree is doing that with its big branches and its leaves that can do photosynthesis, the oak tree is actually acting like God, theos, the unmoved mover, pure form, or actually the acorn is imitating God, copying God, participating in God. Okay, y'all, crazy stuff. We're going to pick up with this next time. May the force be with you and also with you. I will get to your outlines and rough drafts today or tomorrow at the latest. Okay, I will see you on Thursday.